And so I wrote the book 140 Life Lessons I Wish I Knew at 20. And so it's a composition of basically aphorisms. So you open the book and every page, minus the epilogue, is one sentence.
All right.
And that's it. So it's literally a 15-minute read. And then I put it out on Apple Podcasts for free.
Okay.
So anybody can listen to it anytime.
Hello and welcome to the Mayman Show. We are coming to you from our studios in Riyadh, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And today our guest is an author and a former press secretary for the Saudi Embassy in Washington D.C., Miss Fatimah Baeshen. Thank you so much for taking time to be on the show.
Thank you, Hassam, for having me. It's an honor and a privilege. Thanks.
Well, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. And so you have authored a very interesting book with a very interesting title. It's called 140 Lessons I Wish I Knew at 20. Why did you decide to write this book, and what inspired you to create this guide to navigating life?
That's a great question. So I wrote that book during the pandemic. So I think the pandemic was a pause for a lot of folks, not just me.
It was the period of everyone's pet projects.
Right.
Yeah.
I think for me, I describe it as a wrinkle in time.
Yeah?
SubhanAllah.
I was a frontline journalist here.
Okay. So I took the opportunity, I took that downtime to just kind of pull back and self-reflect.
Yeah.
And I did a lot of writing, and that's kind of a cathartic way to process things for me. And so in that evolution, I noticed in true consulting style, because that's also one of my backgrounds, is I just took the takeaway from all of my kind of journaling, in different segments. And I thought to myself, wow, these are durur. I don't know how to say that in English, but these are priceless. Basically.
Priceless.
Pearls of wisdom.
Pearls of wisdoms and guidelines to go by.
Yes, and I thought to myself, wow, I wish I knew these when I was much younger. So I'm 45 now. At the time when I wrote this, I was 42, and I thought to myself, I wish I knew these in my 20s.
All right.
And so I don't have kids, and I thought to myself, this is what I'm going to leave behind when the good Lord calls me home. God willing, it's a long time away.
Inshallah.
And so I wrote the book 140 Life Lessons I Wish I Knew at 20. And so it's a composition of basically aphorisms. So you open the book and every page, minus the epilogue, is one sentence.
All right.
And that's it. So it's literally a 15-minute read. And then I put it out on Apple Podcasts for free.
Okay.
So anybody can listen to it anytime.
All right. And among those 140 lessons, which one holds the most significance to you personally? Which one is close to heart?
Oh, gosh, that's really tough. They're all very close to my heart.
If you're on the Mayman Show, we only ask tough questions.
I know. Yeah, exactly. Pick one only.
One. Yeah.
So all 140 of them are really precious to me. And I have to say, out of all the things that I did in my life, this is the thing I'm the most proud of, because it required a tremendous amount of vulnerability, which is very tough for me publicly.
Okay.
And so they're all really precious to me. But I would say number 1.
Okay.
And number 13, and then number 140.
All right.
So number 1 talks about basically embracing all of yourself.
Okay.
So I don't know if you're familiar with kind of Eastern philosophy, but basically yin and yang.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. That was in my head.
I didn't mean to steal it. Please, we
You stole my thunder.
Sorry.
No, it's all good. Continue.
But basically, you know how the black circle has a white dot,
Yeah.
and the white circle has a black dot, which basically means whatever you would perceive to be as bad in totality has some elements of good.
Good, yeah.
And whatever you perceive to be good in totality has some elements of bad. And I think as, physical beings walking this earth, we all have goodness in us, and we all also have other aspects to us that we have to kind of work through and learn to embrace.
Yeah.
And so that's the first lesson. I'll jump to the last one. The last lesson is about basically no matter what happens in life, no matter what knocks you down, rest, but get up and keep moving, because life just continues.
Yeah,
life
exactly.
goes on.
Life goes on.
So it can be summed up in 3 words. It goes on, basically. 13, I think, is the most powerful, not just because I love that number, but because it talks about the differences among, I'm really big into semantics, and words matter. And so it talks about the nuanced differences among self-confidence, self-worth, and self-assuredness.
Okay.
And so I'll start with self-worth, or self-esteem, excuse me. Self-esteem is really about self-worth.
Okay.
And self-confidence really stems from experience.
Yeah.
And then self-assuredness is really about trusting yourself. And so all three of these aspects, to me, is very important to come from an internal space.
Yeah.
Because if it doesn't come from an internal space, then a person can incessantly seek external validation.
Yeah.
And that is just a rabbit hole and a vortex that can never
It's
kind
a disaster.
It's a disaster.
Because you can never, find validation through
Exactly. I think every human being to some extent needs a level of validation, but to the point where it's incessant.
Yes.
For everything, it's just a recipe for disaster. And so those three are really, but I encourage people to listen to, I mean, it's on Apple Podcasts, it takes like 20 minutes to listen to it. And it takes maybe 15 minutes to read the whole book.
All right. I mean, I see you and me have a lot of similarities. I'm at peace with myself, my pros and cons, and what I find I'm good at or bad at, and basically what the difference between being confident and arrogant is. And
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm zen.
Okay,
Let's
good.
just put it that way.
Good. I got to tell you, that's one of the lessons. One of the lessons, I can't remember which one is, but understanding the difference between ego and confidence.
Yeah?
Yes.
All right. So I must have been like your telekinetic shadow writer while you were doing this.
Oh, if you want to take that credit, I'm not going to be the one to steal it from you. Go ahead.
I'm just joking. You already stole my thunder earlier,
I
so I'm going to steal your thunder now.
I apologize.
All right. You said you come from a consulting background, right?
So my background's in economic development, management consulting, and public affairs.
All right.
But I somehow ended up being press secretary, which was a great opportunity.
Yeah. I mean, let's dive into that a bit. So in 2017, you're appointed as Saudi Arabia's first female spokesperson for the embassy in Washington D.C. What important key changes did you have to make to have a big impact within that role?
So I gotta say, it was an amazing opportunity, but I can't really take the credit for impact as an individual.
Okay.
What I will say is that the role as press secretary didn't exist, and as far as I know, even in other public sector entities.
Okay.
And so coming in as a spokesperson, it was very powerful. Forget first female or male, just first press secretary.
Yeah, in general.
In general, was very powerful and impactful in itself as an institutional position, because then we started to see it in other public sector entities and other ministries, coalitions, and whatnot. And so that, for me, it was the powerful piece. And of course, now when I look around and I see so many women holding,
many prominent positions.
Prominent positions, and also kind of speaking publicly on behalf of Saudi Arabia, for me, makes me happy as a clown.
Okay. All right. I mean, you feel that there is a rapid progress, like in
Oh,
that,
absolutely.
right?
I mean, it just, so I've been out of Saudi since 2020. And so I've been popping in and out for the last I would say 2 months, and it's incredible just in the last 3 years. So I was here at the end of 2014, worked on the announcement of the vision, worked on the implementation of the vision and NTP. And so being here for that, and then leaving and then coming back, and then coming back and leaving again and coming back, and seeing all the changes just in that short time frame as a sociologist it's exponential.
Okay.
And it's really powerful.
So you and me have a similarity. So I'm a consultant. I do communications advisory and consultancy.
Okay.
And I travel frequently. So just to touch on that point, I remember taking a 3-month trip and then coming back to Saudi, and I felt Riyadh was very different in just a span of 3 months.
It's crazy.
Right?
It's crazy how quickly things have evolved.
And And I
And
tell everybody, by the way, like you think, like the saying, there's nothing faster than the New York minute.
oh gosh,
I always
they
say,
need to
come try the Riyadh second.
come try the Riyadh second.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's really powerful. It's really powerful to witness in real time.
Yeah. I mean, it's surreal. It's never going to happen again. This is unprecedented times we live in. But,
Exactly. Exactly.
and you don't really feel it because you're in it. But I think years from now, people will be looking at this as one of the biggest shifts a country has done in such a short span of time, right?
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
So since you travel around a lot and everything, and you've lived abroad, and what's your view on how people generally see Saudi women before and now?
Oh Lord.
Yeah. I gotta ask you the generic question.
I know, but we're so past this
Yeah?
point. Oh my gosh, there's nothing. I mean, there's nothing left really for Saudi women. There are plenty of opportunities in the country for everyone,
Yeah.
and you see women everywhere. I mean, they've gone up into space. They're holding leadership positions.
They're
all the
skydiving,
policies. They're
Racing.
skydiving. Yeah,
I'm just naming what my guests have done.
You're like, this is just my empirical proximity, basically.
Yes, exactly. Space is one of them too.
So, I mean, I think we're so far beyond this question. I'm sorry. I mean,
I have to set you up for it, just to see. Maybe somebody else still has that archaic image, or
yeah, but I mean, I think we've surpassed other countries even. I mean, I think there was a recent regulation or law that was passed around gender parity and salaries. And so, I mean, there are other countries around the world that don't even have that. So
Yeah.
I think we're
good to go, right?
we're well beyond this question, I think.
All right, okay. Then let's talk about the kingdom as a whole and international perceptions,
Oh,
because
goodness.
obviously you have. I mean, I always, as a journalist, I always say that there is those who want to seek the truth and those who just turn a blind eye and don't want to see what the truth is. So, how do you feel it will take to shift international perceptions about the kingdom on a mass level?
So I got to tell you, just like we were saying a moment ago, Saudi has changed significantly, and that's clear.
Yeah.
And I think that change has percolated globally, perceptually.
All right.
And I think a lot of that is because, frankly, you see it socioculturally. The country's opened up in terms of tourism, open-mindedness, gender parity.
Yeah.
We've seen it economically.
Sports.
With
everything.
diversified investments, sports, forward-looking sectors, various elements, and even geopolitically, the country is now a global leader a leader on the global stage.
Yes.
So we've seen Saudi continue to broker peace deals and advocate for peace. We've seen deepened engagement in the Far East. So we've seen various elements, including locally hosting global summits.
Yes.
Towards cooperation, dialogue, alignments. So those are all very powerful and visual representation of the country's shift that percolates into perception. So beyond that, I think the country has reached a stage to not necessarily focus on how are we being perceived.
Yeah.
And it's more around how do we perceive others and with whom do we want to cooperate.
Okay.
That's where I think Saudi is right now, because at this stage, it's a win-win for others to view Saudi as the strong leader that it is. In that regard, it's a matter of cooperations around common interests or common challenges and shared interests. And that's really it. And that for me is a beautiful trajectory.
Okay. I mean, that's a interesting way to put it. I mean, I always say that, the kingdom has made so many strides in further cementing its place on an international level that was, in a nutshell, we used to say we wanted a place, on the international arenas table, to the point where now we don't need one. We have our own table, so we're
Exactly.
inviting people in now,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly. Same. Exactly the same thing. Exactly the same thing.
Okay.
Um, One thing I do want to highlight, going back to the press secretary position.
Okay.
So I got to tell you, I was grateful to have that role, but my background is not comms.
Okay.
As
I
I
mean, you
mentioned,
just said, yeah,
yeah.
earlier.
So my background is not comms, but I have to tell you what I learned from that role is communications. It's probably one of the most important disciplines because a majority of the world's problems boil down to the fact that subject matter experts are not communication experts,
Yes.
and communication experts are not subject matter experts. And
Exactly.
that divergence creates a crap ton of problems.
Okay.
Yes.
That's very interesting because you know what I tell everybody I work with, and because I work for a lot of these projects and everything, I'm like, they're like, what's your role as communications? What do you know? Like, how are you going to, let's say, enhance the health sector or the real estate sector or development and everything? I'm like, it's very straightforward. I'm a subject matter specialist of nothing.
Yeah.
It's your job to tell me the story,
Yeah.
and my job to tell you how we can tell the story in an interesting way to the world.
Right.
I'm like, it's very straightforward. So I'm like, the more you know about what you're doing, the more interesting I can articulate it for you.
But here's the thing about effective communications.
Yeah.
Effective communications has to be anchored in authenticity. And so one of the things that when I was appointed press secretary, even leading up to that,
Yeah.
I was adamant not to go into any kind of public speaking engagement on other people's terms. In terms of, Saudi would often get beat down for not being a democracy.
Yeah.
Saudi Arabia has a different political system.
Exactly.
It has a different history.
We never said we're a democracy.
Right.
We said we're a monarchy.
So exactly. And so for me, it's all about having conversations around context that's relevant to your market.
Yes.
And that's extremely important. So authenticity is a huge piece. The other thing that I learned is that journalism is a business, but journalists are human beings.
Correct.
So building relationships with journalists as human beings was really important. And just kind of having conversations, that piece was really important. But at the end of the day, what really angers me, and anger is just fortified sadness.
Okay.
What angers me is the inherent biases in reporting on, I would say, the Middle East in general, and Saudi being in that bucket. And so that prejudice and that slanted view, which we see more than ever now in the last 3 months, really hurts my heart because you can never win.
Okay.
In that scenario, because the rules will change for you as an other.
Yes,
and
exactly.
That is unfair.
So you're gonna take me out of business because everything you just said is kind of like the building blocks of how I do my day work as either a journalist or a comms guy, and as far as authenticity, I'm all about authenticity.
It's important.
And that goes back to what you were saying. There's prejudice in how people report about the region in general. So I guess what I think is really nice about having this kind of platform is I don't need to sell Saudi for you.
Exactly.
I have people in their experiences telling you how they're living here and everything. Let people's experiences speak for themselves.
Exactly. Exactly.
And that goes back to another question I was going to ask you, because I have that way of thinking because I am a byproduct of East meets West, Saudi meets U.S. So are you.
Yes.
And how did that influence your how did your upbringing in the influence basically the work that you've done and the relationship building between Saudi and U.S. and all that?
So I was born in Charleston, South Carolina, and I was raised in Mississippi.
Cool.
Which is why I speak English with a bit of a southern twang.
Yeah,
And all my Saudi friends love it. So,
Well, I tell my friends I'm the rowdy Saudi who likes to say howdy.
that's
So,
so funny. Basically. And I remember when I think what got me interested in the narrative piece. I grew up in the U.S. I'm 45. I just turned 45 a couple of months ago. I spent 35 of my 45 years in the United States.
all right.
And I came back to Saudi to work. I popped in with the World Bank, and then I moved here, worked on the announcement, prequel to the vision, the fiscal reform announcements, and then worked on the vision and the vision's announcement, et cetera. When we were working on the fiscal reform announcements, that's what piqued my interest around the narrative, because I noticed that what we were sending out in terms of messaging around the fiscal policy reform wasn't taking in the international media space. And I thought it was really interesting as to why.
All right. Well, let's get out of the business realm in your work and writing. So, like, what kind of hobbies, pastimes? What do you do when you're not working? Basically?
Yeah, exactly. So I
like watching movies, so I'm just trying to get the ball rolling.
Movies are a great escape mechanism.
Yeah.
But I love writing. I love hiking. I also like roller skating.
Really?
Yes.
Roller skating?
But I'm risk averse, which you can't really tell, but I am risk averse. So I'll have to wear a helmet and like knee pads.
Okay, so you're not one of those people that go to the roller disco. Right?
No, I'm not a roller disco person.
All right, okay.
But yeah, that's basically it. And just kind of relaxing and spending time with my chosen family, which are my friends.
Okay.
That's basically
And when you guys
it.
hang out, what do you guys do? Barbecue?
Yeah, basically, we
Yeah.
either go to the desert, a barbecue, go to the beach. I love to walk.
Yeah.
Walking helps me process.
Yeah.
And so I'll drag my friends with me to go
Really?
for a walk. Yeah.
Did you have any good southern brisket yet in Saudi? I mean, there's lots of. Do you know what the interesting part is? The best southern barbecue, Southwest barbecue I've had,
Yeah.
is here in Riyadh.
Is it Korean or is it Saudi?
It is from the southwest of the U.S. and it's here in Riyadh.
You're
Saudi
kidding.
Arabia. Yeah, it's
That's crazy. Everything is here.
Yeah, exactly.
Everything is here.
The Spanish Liga's here now.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
All right. And before we wrap up the interview, I always ask my guests this question. Everyone has a personal message for my audience. What's yours?
I would say make room for other people.
And why is that?
I think oftentimes human beings can look at life in a binary way. And oftentimes it can be a zero-sum game perspective, that if this person wins and I lose.
Yeah.
And I just encourage all of us to have a far more expanded purview and in terms of cooperation and just making room for everyone to help contribute towards the country's long-term aims. The other thing that I would encourage everyone to do is to live spherically.
Okay.
So if you're a minister and you love to paint, go paint.
Okay.
It doesn't dilute the fact that you're a minister.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you're working as an accountant, have a nighttime talk show host, be a nighttime talk show podcast host. I mean, just live
if you're a
spherically.
comms advisor for, Vision 2030 projects, it's okay to moonlight as a podcast show host and speak to an author.
Live spherically. Live spherically. It can be very powerful.
All right. Okay. That's fair enough. That's some good advice.
Yes.
Is always follow your passion.
Yes.
You never know where it leads you, right?
That's very true.
Okay. And we won't take much of your time. You've been a good sport, and you've put up with my harassment for a couple of for this interview.
You've been very generous. You've been a very great host. Thank you so much.
I appreciate having you on the show. And before we wrap up, did you ever see the show before?
I looked at a few recently.
Yeah.
And I saw some on LinkedIn.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what made you want to come on when you saw it?
I thought it was a great platform that served as an inspirational source.
All right.
And just a great way to for people to share their stories to help other folks
Yeah.
be more comfortable.
All right. Well, I'm gonna go home with a smile on my face because my show is inspiring somebody. So
Good.
to me, I just sit there and say, these poor suckers have to listen to me banter for a good 30 minutes.
Good. Good.
Anyways, well, it's all the time that we have for this interview. We could do this all night. I mean, you're fun conversation.
Thank you.
But we got places to be and future books to write, I guess.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Thank you, Hassan.
No problem. All right, and be sure to stay tuned to the Mayman Show. See you later.